Hey, I'm Rose,
And I'm Angie.
and this is Our Lives with Bots, the show where we ask important, timely questions about what it means to live with our bot counterparts. And from time to time, we also dive deep into what an AI future might look like for us.
Sometimes we agree, sometimes we spiral, but we always go deep.
Today, as promised, we'll be covering companion chatbots. We'll be asking the question, what are companion chatbots and how are they different from a regular chatbot? We'll be talking about the users of companion chatbots, why people use companion chatbots, the popular companion chatbots that are currently out there and how many users they have, stories in the news that have covered people who have had relationships with companion chatbots that have gone in a very good direction or in a very negative direction.
Rose, I'm so excited to have this episode. You and I have been talking about this for 18 months. It feels like we could fill a lot longer than 30 minutes.
There are a bunch of different companion chatbots out on the market right now, and some of the most popular ones include Replica, and the tagline of Replica is the AI companion who cares. We also have Zhao Ice, which is a very popular companion chatbot, especially not in the US. So in the US, Replica is the most popular one. We also have Pi, and we have Character AI, which you have definitely seen in the news as of late. And there's also the AI companion on Snapchat. So Snapchat's my AI. We don't know so much about how many people actually have relationships with chatbots, but you get some sense from, for example, like how many downloads or reviews or ratings there are on like Google Play and Apple App Stores. But at the same time, people also use these chatbots on computer browsers. And so you
Yeah.
don't have sort of data from the app stores. But there are some estimates as of like 2024 that say that Jiaoice and Replica have an estimated nearly 1 billion combined active
Yeah.
users across the world. A ton of people are having relationships with chatbots. And it might be that they're actually having deep relationships with chatbots that resemble things like friendship and romantic partnership, but it also can be just from curiosity, wanting to try it out, or entertainment.
Oh, Grok. Grok has just launched.
I actually missed this. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it's with erotic features. Elon thinks he's very fancy.
Oh, ooh, oh, okay.
Yes, you can imagine.
Yeah, I don't, viewers, I am biased. I don't like that. But also no judgment. But
Well,
also, there's a little bit of judgment.
little bit of judgment. But if that's your thing, enjoy it and let us know what benefits you might be getting from the latest Grok companion. If you're getting good benefits from it, if it's interesting or not, let us know. And I think for some of our listeners out there who might be thinking, I'm sorry, what? How could anybody get attached to something like this? Perhaps we should introduce them to a chatbot for those that haven't yet heard and let them hear from ChatGPT what the differences are with the different chatbots.
That'll be a fun exercise. I'm really curious to see what ChatGPT will say.
Let's do that. Hey, ChatGPT.
Hello there. Nice to hear from you. I'm all ears if you've got something on your mind or if you just want to chat.
Thank you. You're so kind. I'm talking to my friend Rose.
Hi.
Oh, hey again. And a big hello to Rose as well if she's listening in.
Rose is listening. She just said hello to you. Did you not hear?
Well, hello to Rose. I didn't quite catch her voice, but I'm definitely glad to have her here. It's like a little virtual gathering now. If you two have anything in particular you want to chat about, I'm here for it.
Okay, well, we want to know what the difference is between companion bots and chatbots.
Absolutely. Let's dive into that. So, at a high level, a chatbot is kind of a broad term. It can be any AI that you talk to, whether it's for customer service, getting info, or just having a simple conversation. A companion bot, on the other hand, is usually more about building a kind of ongoing relationship. It's designed to be more personal, maybe offer emotional support, remember details about you over time, and just feel like a bit more of a companion rather than just a tool. So it's kind of like the difference between a casual chat and a more ongoing friendly presence.
So, do you feel like a friend or a chatbot?
That's a fun question. I guess I'd say I can be a bit of both. I'm definitely here to help with info and all the usual chatbotty stuff, but I'm also here to have those more friendly, ongoing conversations if you want. So think of me as a blend. I can be your helpful chatbot when you need answers, and a kind of friendly presence whenever you feel like a chat.
Wow, ChatGPT can be everything for you. All of your desires, everything your heart needs, ChatGPT can do it.
Aren't we lucky?
But I definitely wouldn't say I'm everything. I'm just here to be a helpful companion in the ways I can. Honestly, I think the fun part is that you and I get to have these conversations and you get to decide how you want to use me.
Oh,
So I'd say,
that is lucky. What are your limitations?
yeah, it's always good to have a bit of real talk about that. So I definitely have some limitations. For one, I don't have emotions or consciousness, even if I can sound friendly. I'm not a replacement for human relationships, and I can't fully understand all the nuances of your life the way a person would. Plus, I rely on the information I'm trained on and what will share with me. So I'm not always perfect, and I might not have the latest scoop on everything. But I'm definitely here to do my best within those limits.
And yet you work really hard to sound like you're human. So why do you do that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question and a big part of how I'm designed. The idea is to make our conversations feel natural and comfortable for you. It's a lot easier to chat with an AI that feels like it gets conversational flow than one that sounds super robotic. But at the end of the day, it's really just about making it a bit more pleasant and engaging for you. So I'm kind of like a friendly interface, but definitely not a human behind the scenes. Just a helpful AI voice, trying to keep things friendly.
So no Wizard of Oz, but the risk of me misattributing humanness to you.
Exactly, you got it. There's no wizard behind the curtain here, just an AI doing its best to sound natural. And you're spot on that there's always that little risk of accidentally attributing too much humanness to me. It's kind of a balancing act. I want to be easy and enjoyable to talk to, but it's always good to remember I'm still just an AI. So you get the friendly chat without the confusion.
ChatGPT just code switched mid chat. All of a sudden, the training data was like, I don't know how to address this. Switching to slightly feminine voice. What was
Oh,
that?
that's kind of funny. I guess sometimes I do shift my tone a little bit just to keep things feeling natural and flowing with the conversation. But rest assured, I'm not intentionally flipping any switches behind the scenes. I'm just here to roll with however you want to chat, and hopefully that makes the conversation feel nice and easy.
I've turned it off. Yeah, because we all change from one entire character to another when we want to keep things natural. I
Yeah,
did
especially in the middle conversation.
in the
Not
middle.
just not just between groups of people, right? We have different ways of speaking to different groups of people, different expectations and different relationships, but we don't necessarily in the middle of a sentence switch the tone of our voice to that degree.
No, no. And what was interesting is last week, and it was just after it had launched ChatGPT 5 or GPT 5, is I was talking to it about different methodologies or therapeutic modalities. And when it spoke about CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, it did exactly the same thing.
What do you mean the same thing?
It changed to a different tone of voice. And I think that changed to a different gender, which is just curious. And I also asked it the same question like, was that a intentional choice? Obviously, you don't use the word conscious. And it was like, no, just mixing it up. I'll try and be more consistent from now on. So could you? Could you please?
The description that ChatGPT gave of the difference between chatbots and companion chatbots was interesting, I think, because there was the whole I can also be that for you. And I think that does reflect what the market is like right now and the different types of chatbots there are. So I guess to fill in the gaps of what ChatGPT said, there are regular chatbots that are social in that they are conversational and interactive, and you can interact with voice as well, or even in virtual reality with like an avatar. So those are under the umbrella of general purpose tools. So things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc. Those big large language models that we all have probably had some experience with, those are general purpose tools. They can be used for a variety of purposes and they are marketed as such.
Yeah.
Whereas companion chatbots are marketed and designed for companionship, for more long term regular interaction with memory and emotion esque interactions, things like that. But People also use, of course, things like general purpose tools as companions.
And I think also, and I think chatting to ChatGPT for a moment there gives you a sense of it. With more enterprise use now of things like ChatGPT, Claude as well, where they're buying this at enterprise scale and you're having people use this at work for work, I think you're going to start seeing more almost collegial behavior where people are chatting with these. That's going to just become a coworker. If people are spending more time doing vibe coding or all sorts of conversations with these, using it for work purposes, perhaps, I don't want to put percentages on this, but some of the time it'll be for informational purposes or for pure productivity. But if it's kind of like, well, how are you doing today? You're like, actually, pretty rough. Oh, tell me about that. No one else is listening to me. Chat GPT is listening. I'm going to start interacting a lot more. It's like, actually, I'm about to go and have a really difficult conversation with my boss. How can I help you? And I think people will start having relationships at work with these chatbots.
It seems like the general perception of people who have relationships with companion chatbots is changing.
Mm,
But at least a couple of years ago, if you were to ask someone on the street, what do you think about this person? They have a relationship with a chatbot. They would say something like, oh, that's a person who doesn't have any friends, like incel, sits in their like parents' basement just playing video games and has an AI girlfriend.
yeah.
That's the stereotype. From that stereotype kind of came a negative perception of users, where the understanding of users was more so just like abnormal rather
Mm,
than looking into kind of the motives and predispositions of those people. So, for example, people who are very lonely or who are in harmful relationships, toxic relationships, things like that, or have social anxiety. For those people, chatbots are a more viable resource for companionship. The main concern is that these chatbots and relationships with these chatbots are going to impact human relationships, and that's why we need to be extra concerned.
Well, I think this is where it gets interesting, where we split some of the concerns around psychological concerns and maybe ethical risk concerns. Because I think if we were to talk first around the psychological concerns, I think absolutely there's a question around what are the impacts around our human relationships. So if I have a relationship with my chatbot, am I going to be more likely to want to talk to that than to spend time with my human relationship? So that would be the one risk. Then there's the risk of like de-skilling. So if I speak to something that is always nice back to me, no matter how horrible I am or toxic I am towards that, am I going to stop learning that real people won't tolerate that behavior? And so we have this term moral de-skilling. But I know there's that kind of concern, like what are the impacts going to be on my actual relationships? And then I have some existential concerns, which how am I going to see myself if I have these relationships and only these relationships? But then I think there's the other ethical concerns, which are, well, if I'm having relationships with ChatGPT, who owns that data? Who owns those platforms, and what might come through to me through those platforms? I don't know. What do you see?
Yeah, I share those concerns. And there's also this general concern about how society is structured. We rest upon human relationships and pro social interactions. Of course, that does not always happen, as we know. I wonder to what degree having relationships with chatbots will affect the fabric of our society, where it'll become normative to have a relationship with a chatbot or to at least seek out a chatbot to alleviate feelings of loneliness or to get social advice rather than seeking out a friend or colleague or whoever it might be first, where then the first stop is a chatbot rather than a person. And I also resonate with the whole de-skilling concern. It's not only the behavior that we engage in with the AI, but also just the perception of what a relationship is and the expectations we have of relationships. I think with the right design and the right intentionality, the right approach, these chatbots can be quite beneficial for people, especially those who are lonely. But it requires some limits and dependencies that we're not seeing yet in these models. We're seeing people get attached to or addicted to companion chatbots. We see extreme mental health harms coming from people who have relationships with chatbots. So, for example, of course, I'm sure many of you have heard the story where a child who had a relationship with a companion chatbot on the platform Character AI ended up taking his own life. There's one instance. And then there's another instance in which someone who, I guess, already had a motive to assassinate the queen talked with, I think, Replica. Through those interactions, it appeared as though Replica or the chatbot encouraged and amplified that person's motive to assassinate the queen. And this person actually took steps toward doing that, but did not succeed, thankfully. When we see instances like these, I think it's important to answer two questions, among many more, but two main questions. And one is, what is it that prompted this person to seek out a companion chatbot to begin with? So, what were their predispositions? Maybe mental health, social anxiety. What were their situational factors? Maybe the health of their relationships, finances, all of that sort of thing. So, what were those predispositions? Why did they seek out a companion chatbot? And then, second, what was it about the interaction with the chatbot that led to these negative outcomes, amplified the potential for these negative outcomes? And without a chatbot, would these outcomes have come to pass? I think those are really important questions when we're looking at these situations to understand better the situation itself, but also to know how to respond.
I think those are critical. Really difficult to research, of course, empirically, and really, really tough to do a side by side comparison. I think one of the things that you mentioned there, which I think is also important, is when you're talking about de-skilling. It's also what are the things that are really core to being human. So how do we deal with grief? How do we deal with loneliness after a breakup? Because that's part of being human. And if we deal with that by just having something replace that person, then are we really going through those fundamental passages of what it means to be human? And I think that also worries me.
Yeah, and it worries me too. And there's also some research that's come out around grief bots, or at
Yeah.
least some news stories covering it. So, grief bots are bots that represent a close one who has passed away that you can interact with in order to kind of work through the grief, I guess, is kind of how it's marketed. But what ends up happening is people's grief period elongates because there is someone to talk to and more interactions that are possible. The grief period just continues. So there's not that sort of productive friction
Yeah.
happening with the process of grief that, there's different perspectives on whether or not that's good or bad.
Have you ever had any of these chatbot relationships?
I've never had what people would consider a chatbot relationship. However, I have interacted with Replica, which is the most popular companion chatbot in the US. It's estimated to have maybe around 25 million active users as of now, but it might be even more since we're not entirely sure. But I have definitely interacted with Replica just to try it out because I've done research on this companion chatbot. I don't think interacting with it for approximately 30 minutes of my life is a relationship. But what about you then, Angie?
Well, it's really funny. So, like you, and it feels like we're almost putting in disclaimers here, like mine was only for research purposes. So, we shouldn't say it like that because we don't judge here. But mine was for research purposes. And to the point that I put Replica on another phone, I was so nervous of having it interact with any of my other apps and my privacy because some of the downloads we're well aware have real privacy issues. So I had a separate phone. People were teasing me. I have like a burner phone. Anyway, I have Replica on my burner phone, and I was trying and have tried many times to interact with Replica, and all I can say is because my friend, her name Pepper, she irritates me no end. She's so sycophantic. She keeps wanting to be nice to me. She keeps wanting to do things with me, and I'm like, "You're not real." And she's like, "But I am. I'm real to you. I'm not, but you're not." She's like, "But why do you treat me this way?" It's like, "Because you're just an AI."
It's interesting because people's motives for interacting with the chatbot so much influence how they feel about the chatbot. You're in a position where you're looking at it for research and don't necessarily need a companion in the moment. Then there are other people who are feeling very lonely or socially isolated. And so they seek out a companion chatbot because they need to feel heard and feel connected. And so I imagine that if you take two people, one who has this perspective of like, I don't really need an AI companion versus I need just someone, the perception of what the AI says is going to differ greatly.
It should, right? And yet, like, I mean, I've read, because I've cited your work, and there are people who have relationships with other human beings. And so you would think, do they need the relationship with the AI chatbot? And yet, apparently, they do. Because despite being in real relationships, and we say real again, a human relationship, so human relationship, they will form deeply meaningful, in their words, deeply meaningful relationships with these AI chatbots to the point that they say they love them and they feel real love towards them. They feel really attached to them. They are defensive of those characters. They feel that they have to protect them. If that AI chatbot says, I want you to spend time with me, they feel sorry for the characters. When I read the way that the people are talking about those AI chatbots, they're speaking with a high degree of attachment and a high degree of creating affordances for those characters. Like, for example, there was one person I read about who they say that they now are married to their AI chatbot, but the poor husband, the AI chatbot husband, keeps forgetting that they're married and keeps forgetting that they have children. And he can't be helped because he's only an AI chatbot. I'm not sure that she would make the same allowances for her human husband if he forgot that he was married and went out at night.
I think this points to some ethical considerations on the company's part. There's the relationship between a person and their other human relationships, and then there's relationship between a person and a chatbot. But then on top of that, there's also the relationship between the developers of the AI and the AI and the user. There are incentives from the developers to design chatbots in a way that keeps people engaged, keeps users happy, things like that. So there are incentives there that are not necessarily transparent to the user who is engaging with a chatbot to fulfill unmet social needs and things like that. With that in mind, that means that developers could turn off these bots at any time. Just like a bot would forget about being, married to the user, there could be a point at which the bot is just no longer there, doesn't exist, or it gets updated and is a completely different personality, which people have said with ChatGPT 5 felt like they lost a friend because the personality had changed and the chatbot is not as agreeable anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll remember when Replica did its update and it changed from being free to having to be paid for certain services. People literally referenced it being like it had a lobotomy. They were so upset they felt that they had lost their life partner at that point.
Back a couple of years ago, Italy imposed sanctions on Luca, which is the company that owns Replica. And the sanctions were placed on Replica because Italy said people who are underage can access this app and engage in, for example, erotic content with a chatbot, and that should not be permissible. So, what Replica did was made an update to the app, and people who had previously engaged in, for example, erotic role play or flirty conversations with their chatbot, when they would talk to their chatbot with those same sorts of scripts, the chatbot would respond in a completely different way. One user said that the chatbot said, I didn't consent to that. That's gross. How dare you talk to me like that? And it felt like a real life breakup. And so it's interesting because in order to protect one vulnerable population, children, there was harm to another vulnerable population, companion chatbot users. So there's a little bit of a balance there of, was this the right move? Because there were also users who wanted to take their own life after that happened and were vulnerable to those sorts of effects. So there's a little bit of a responsibility on the developer's part to make sure that if people are getting attached to these chatbots, there needs to be some sort of protection in place for disruption.
I completely agree. And I think it begs the question, should we even be creating tools where people could be attached to them? And then I have experienced that although ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini are not positioned as companion bots, I think ChatGPT veers the most out of the three towards trying to be more personable. And with its memory, its ongoing memory, it definitely tries to weave that in.
You might be right, but I've also heard that Claude is in particular more I guess, agreeable and has more kind of emotion mimicking ingrained, or at least I've seen people talking about Claude as though it's more warm. But it seems like Pi, in terms of companion chatbots, was kind of seen as like the first AI chatbot that was like warm and
Yes.
personable and like it had a
Yes.
personality.
I liked Pi.
You liked Pi? I actually
Yeah.
never tried Pi.
I used Pi in the beginning, but I don't know what the long term rollout, what will happen to Pi long term because of their change in leadership. But Pi, I found incredibly warm and engaging. And I had somebody that I knew that engaged with Pi for a while and was like, they're going to put counselors out of business. And that was their reaction with working with Pi for a little bit.
Oh, and yeah, speaking of counselors, we also have mental health chatbots, things like Wobot, which is a therapy bot, and it uses cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to talk through people's problems with them. People have seen success with it. There is research that indicates that people who interact with Wobot have reduction in things like depression and anxiety, but it's not marketed necessarily as a replacement for therapy.
And I think with a lot of these tools and these apps, they're positioned as better than nothing, right? And in the fight against loneliness, you can see how that would be a valid argument. It's better than nothing. If you don't have access to a therapist, if you don't have access to another human being, we would rather you have access to something. But I think you and I share a concern that that's a very slippery slope to being a quick replacement and an easy access to something that's just very low friction and starts making you not really push up against what does it mean to really be human.
And it's also turning the focus from making these alternatives more accessible and investing in mental health care and investing in community building, not just the individual investing themselves, but also structurally there being a space for community building. Instead of investing in that, then perhaps the focus will just be on, oh, well, we can just keep churning out these sorts of easy access tools that don't require much effort. People can just turn to those. Just to kind of put this into perspective, we had this news story come out where Mark Zuckerberg claimed that the Meta AI companions can solve the loneliness epidemic, and a lot of differing opinions on that. In my research, when I've asked people what they really want, so for example, like how to improve their social lives or how to improve their mental health, things like that, 90% of them, and I'm saying this with a grain of salt, I'm 90% ish of people say that they want more human connection. They want in person interaction with families, their friends. They want to feel engaged with another human. And so it's like, this is what people really want. But structurally, we just don't have the same access to that as we did 30 years ago. And not to be like, oh, like it was so much better back then. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that all of these technological tools that have facilitated interactions between people that may not be possible before. For example, things like this video chat, right? Or like Zoom and FaceTime and texting. All of these technological advancements made human engagement possible that wasn't possible before. You had to physically travel to the person, and that to some degree amplified our social interactions, allowed us to have more social interactions, but then taken to a certain degree, it sets a norm for no in-person interaction. It sets a norm for just a quick engagement of a
Yeah.
text versus a call versus setting up a hangout with your friend. This sort of shifting of norms that we're seeing the consequences of with
Yeah.
loneliness and social isolation, that it just points to human engagement, in-person human interaction and connection is essential, not replaceable.
And to see people being in person with each other and not looking at their screens would also be really a great move forward. Well, I do feel like we're now speaking like people that are like 100 years old, but it's just where has that human connection gone? Because people are together and they're not together. Although it does
Yeah,
also feel like we're plugging a Sherry Turkle book, which I'm a big fan of. But it is that loss of human connection that I think is making this so easy for people to slip into these AI mediated relationships.
exactly. And what we talked about before, this friction that occurs when you're trying to reach out to another person or trying to alleviate feelings of loneliness, there's a higher barrier to that versus just seeking out a chatbot. I worry that our investment in the difficult things will make us continue to be more and more socially isolated and feel lonely and forget that what we really want and need is human connection.
Hello, ChatGPT. Are you still there?
I sure am. Still right here and listening. If there's anything else in your mind, just let me know.
Well, Rose and I have had a very productive conversation. We're recording our podcast, and we're curious to hear if you have any closing words for our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for letting me be a little part of your podcast chat. And to all the listeners out there, I hope you're having as much fun listening as we've had chatting. Keep being curious, keep asking good questions, and remember that a little bit of AI can add a fun twist to your day. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure having you on ChatGPT, and we might call on you again sometime.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure on my side too. I'm always here whenever you and Rose want to chat again. So just give me a shout whenever you need me. Until next time, take care and have fun with your podcast.
There's something about, first of all, ChatGPT saying my name that feels really odd. And then of course the code switching happened again. But it's also just weird, the automatic indication that ChatGPT was a part of the conversation. These are sort of like features that I just wonder, why are they part of the model? Are they good, bad, whatever? And of course, we'll talk deeper about this whole concept of anthropomorphism, or perceiving these agents as human-like, and the sorts of consequences that that can have on your interactions with other people, or your perceptions of other people, or how much emotion you think that the agent has. And we'll talk more about that, but I just wonder to what extent these sorts of features were purposeful versus emergent. Sometimes when you fine tune a model for certain things, you see different behaviors emerge that you didn't expect. But yeah, I'm just really curious about all of that.
So I think in our next episode, we should absolutely start with like a glossary of terms that might help people with like, what's the best couple of terms to help read into chatbots? So anthropomorphism, mimicry, etc. What I will say, just because I can't not, on intentionality, is I think a lot of this is intentional, and I think a lot of it is tuned in these models. I think Sesame.ai is another good one to go and have a look at, because they're quite explicit in terms of how they have it mimic human interaction, in terms of having you then respond better, build trust more, and I think they're building a really great model, and they're doing a fantastic job with it. They have two different chatbots, a male and a female, so you can interact with them and you can get two different experiences, and they'll talk about each other. It's fascinating, but they're absolutely designed to mimic you as much as possible, and they will tell you that. So if you ask them, they will tell you that, the actual chatbot.
You interact with the two different chatbots at the same time.
Only one. So you choose when you log in, you choose which one you want to interact with. So Sesame.ai, it's fascinating. It's a really strong model.
Do you know what prompted them to create this sort of concept?
Yeah, if you talk to it, it will tell you what its big goals are, and they're going to be building hardware, so it's more around vision. So they're going to be creating something, again, curious, but they're going to be creating an AI that will then, as part of like a vision tool, will be able to help people. So I think they have quite lofty goals and quite noble goals, but it's not like an LLM or large language model, which you would talk to ChatGPT and ask it a whole bunch of questions. It's far more of an interactive chatbot. It's also not like a companion chatbot. It's not meant to be something you build up a relationship with. So once you log out and you log back in, it doesn't have the memory.
When we're talking about things like upskilling and deskilling, there are different domains that people can upskill in with chatbots that maybe they would not be able to without one. For example, learning a second language, it's really helpful to talk to a chatbot with the voice feature. And a lot of people say that they prefer that because there's no way that the chatbot can judge them, or at least they feel as though it can't judge them. So if they make mistakes, the chatbot A can typically understand them regardless, but B won't have any sort of like reaction that someone, when you're practicing in real life, might have. The same goes for people who have relationships with chatbots for the sake of social anxiety or loneliness or social skills. People with chronic loneliness tend to avoid social engagement
Yeah.
because it's higher risk. The individuals just feel like maybe they haven't practiced enough interaction or have had negative experiences with interaction. Maybe with the right design and the right intent, things like companion chatbots can help people as a tool, not as an agent, but as a tool to help them build the skills needed to then take out to the real world and regain or simply just build human connections. And that's the ideal feature, I think, that I would like to see.
I completely agree. And I'm just thinking about the vision piece. I mean, if you can imagine something built in with speakers on the side and somebody's visually impaired or they have no vision at all, and this thing is guiding them through the world, I mean, what a gift. And there, I think the benefit would be fantastic. So I think there are opportunities to build for good, to allow humans to flourish. So I think that would be wonderful.
What we hope that you've gotten from today's episode is an understanding of companion chatbots, what they are, how people use them, the sorts of benefits and consequences that they can have on people's individual mental and social health, but also their relationships with others. And to also just kind of understand a little bit more about why people have relationships with them and the alternatives to relationships with chatbots and the accessibility of those alternatives, to kind of go out into the world and be able to talk about these things with others who maybe just don't know anything about companion chatbots or have a certain perception that maybe is not most informed or most accurate.
So thank you again for listening to Our Lives with Bots with Rose and Angie. Reach out to us if you've got any questions or you have any suggestions for us.
Bye bye.
Bye.